Will everyone please rise for the presentation of colors by the UCA Reserve Officers Training Corps? You may be seated. Good morning, everyone. My name is Caden Malott, and on behalf of Greenbrier High School and the Greenbrier East program, I welcome you all to our 15th annual Veterans Day ceremony. It's events such as these that remind us what's most important: connection. It seems as if the 21st century has been marred by nothing but division and bitterness. Events such as Veterans Day ceremonies, where people of many different creeds, cultures, and backgrounds are together as one, prove the power of unity, connection, and love. The reason we are all here today, as one, shouldn't be forgotten. We are here to honor those who so diligently, so selflessly, served and defended our country, as well as those who continue to do so today. Maybe you fought in the mountains of the Korean War, guarding yourselves against the freezing cold. You might have been in the wetlands of Vietnam, taking a stand for those too weak to go it alone. You could have been in the deserts of the Middle East, called upon to defend the liberty that was attacked on that fateful September day. Or maybe you were a mechanic, repairing tools needed to preserve peace in our homeland. Regardless of your rank, division, or duty, you are the heroes we admire. You are the ones who rise to the occasion, take the call, and truly change the world. Thank you for all you've done for this country. My fellow students, take a look around us. When society tries to force hatred into our bodies and division into our souls, remember these veterans. And remember the 1.1 million veterans that aren't with us here today. And remember that we are all American. There is no real difference between us. Once we realize that, we will have matured beyond our years and into the arms of freedom. I want to thank you all for attending today, and thank you again to our veterans and active duty members. No matter where you served, when you served, or what you did, You have made us all one here today. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the Greenbrier High School Band playing Armed Forces on Parade, a medley of service songs. When you hear the song that represents your branch, please stand and wave so that you can be honored. The Navy. The Army. The Marine Corps. The Air Force. Thank you.
Good morning, students, veterans, and parents. I'm Katie Simmons, a junior here at GHS. Today, I have the honor of presenting the Quilts of Valor to two distinct veterans. Each year, the EHC Roadrunner Club donates beautiful patriotic quilts to honor a veteran in our community. This year, we are privileged to donate 2 quilts. Our first quilt recipient is Corporal Walter Dean Patton. Mr. Patton joined the Arkansas National Guard in 1948. After completing basic training in Camp Roberts in California, he was sent to Fort Lawton, Washington, and stationed in Seattle. Mr. Patton served in the Vietnam War from 1952 to 1954 and was commissioned to take supplies from Alaska through near the Russian border to our troops in Vietnam. Mr. Patton is a devoted husband, married for 66 years. He is the proud father of 2 daughters. Mr. Patton loved every moment he was in the military. He found basic training easy because of the work ethic that he had developed early on in childhood on the farm. His friends think of him as quiet, honorable, devoted, and a great dancer. Mr. Patton, would you please stand so we may honor you? Our second quilt recipient is Master Chief James W. Blue. Retired Master Chief James W. Blue is a Vietnam War veteran and served 33 years in the United States Navy. After completing boot camp in the Great Lakes, Illinois, and the Yeoman A School in Bainbridge, Maryland, he served 2 years in the Naval School's Mine Warfare in Charleston, South Carolina. Master Chief Blue reported for duty aboard the USS Vance DER 387 in November of 1968. The ship's duties included hunting for North Vietnam contraband-carrying vessels and preventing delivery of those cargoes to the Viet Cong. The USS Vance was also reported for insertion and extraction of the Navy SEAL teams in the South China Sea. He served aboard the USS Wainwright DLG-28 as its first career counselor and was personally responsible for achieving high retention rates for the period of 1974 through 1976. As a member of the Navy's career force, Master Chief Blue served as Navy recruiting districts in Dallas, San Antonio, and Little Rock. He became the director of the Enlisted Navy Recruiting Orientation Unit in Pensacola, Florida, where his instructors and staff graduated approximately 75,000 enlisted Navy recruiters. Master Chief Blue ended his military career in Macon, Georgia, as the Area Chief 3 recruiter responsible for enlisted recruiting production for a 9-state area. Master Chief Blue currently enjoys retirement by playing as much golf as possible and meeting new and interesting people. He and his wife Lydia met in the Navy and have been married for 36 years. They have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Mr. Blue, will you please stand so we may honor you? Again, we are honored to present these ceremonial quilts from the ladies of the EHC Roadrunner Club, and we appreciate all the work that goes into them, as well as for helping us prepare for the meal for our luncheon later. Next, we will have a performance by the GHS Choir. They will be singing America the Dream, directed by Braden Fisher.
Good morning. My name is Addison Duncan, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. State Representative Trevor Drown, a fifth-generation Arkansan and 40-year resident of Pope County, was first elected state representative in 2014. Trevor has proven and continues to demonstrate his commitment to serving through his military and community participation. Trevor graduated from Russellville High School in 1988 and obtained his Bachelor's of Arts degree in Spanish from Arkansas Tech University in 2001. His education has broadened during his 25 years of service in the United States military. Trevor has served in Afghanistan and South Sudan as a Green Beret with the 2nd Battalion, 20th Special Forces Group Airborne. He has earned many decorations, including the Combat Infantryman Badge, Bronze Star for Service, and Army Commendation Medal for Valor. Besides the cherished role of a family man, as well as roles as a businessman, an Army National Guardsman, a timber farmer, and a state representative, Trevor makes time to enjoy seasonal outdoor activities in the natural state, such as hunting and fishing. Trevor and his wife, the former Kara Cochran of Dover, and their 2 children, Aiden and Ella, reside in Dover. Would you please welcome our guest speaker, State Representative Trevor Drown.
Well, thank you, Addison, and thank you all. Before I get started, I would like to say this is the second time I've been here in Greenbrier, and the first time was last spring at the FFA fundraiser, and I was absolutely floored at the level of craftsmanship and what the kids here at this school are able to put together and do. And of course, the second time for this event today, and I've been watching, and of course I pay attention being a senior NCO, a senior enlisted man, and watching these kids that they have given the controls for this program to, and the level of professionalism, and they've just, you're absolutely done a fantastic job, and this school is doing a fantastic job with our young people. So there's always a couple of folks or a couple of groups that I like to recognize when I give a speech around the state or around the country. And if you are a family member of a veteran or a service member, would you please raise your hand? I want to thank each and every one of you for your service. Being a father with 2 kids, have a son that's about to turn 18, been away from home more since the war started 9/11/2001, I understand the sacrifice that you give, not only when the service member is gone, but when the service member returns home a different person, and you are trying to understand what it is that service member is dealing with. So thank you all for that. And the second group, World War II veterans. Please, are there any here today? Any World War II veterans? Have one right here. Ladies and gentlemen, we owe everything that we have and who we are today because of the greatest generation. And I'm going to, when I go into my speech here in a minute, it's a little bit of a history lesson, but you're going to see why those men and women gave up, some of them up to 5 years of their life. They left home, wife was pregnant with her child, they came home, their child was 5 years old. They missed a whole time, space in time because of the service they gave it to this great nation. So thank you for everything that you've done for us. So the theme of my speech today is something that I've heard reoccurring since I started running for office. And it's something that I find quite troubling, being a veteran. And it always seems to come to the surface when I'm running against somebody who's never served in the military. It's not the person that's running, but it's somebody that's out in the public that may be supporting the other person. And that phrase is, being a veteran doesn't matter. And when I hear that, it absolutely sets me back, because I understand wholeheartedly what being a veteran means and the sacrifices, as we just talked about with some of the folks we recognize, that take place within those families. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson, so bear with me. Quite a few numbers here, but you'll get it at the end when we bring it all together. World War I, April the 6th, 1917 through November the 11th of 1918. A couple of things happened then. First of all, selective service. For those of you that are about to turn 18 years of age, you will have to sign up for selective service. That means you potentially in the future, if we go to war and more manpower or woman power is needed, you will have to sign up for the draft. That's every male. It started out from the ages of 21 to 30 and expanded to 18 to 45 years of age. In World War I, 2 million Americans volunteered to go fight in Europe where everything was in chaos. Everybody, it seems like, was declaring war on everybody else. And 2.8 million were drafted. Those men at the time, men were the ones who pretty much served in the military that had signed up for selective service. World War II, December 7th, 1941. A time when we were not at war. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. 2,335 Americans were killed that morning. 1,143 were wounded. The next day, we declared war on Japan. Germany declared war on us. 10 million of our men and women served in the military. Just over 6.1 million were drafted, and just over 3.8 million volunteered to fight in the Pacific and in Europe. My family alone, it seems like in this nation we have a class of people, and it's been termed this, I've heard it as of late, a warrior class. It seems like generation after generation after generation are sending their family members to join the military and to fight the nation's battles, to fight the wars. My great-grandmother had 6 sons. She sent 5 of them to war. 2 of them were killed in action. 1 was wounded in the Pacific, and 1 was wounded in the Battle of the Bulge. That story is repeated over and over and over with families who started having multiple service members serve in World War II. Korean War, June 25th, 1950. The Soviet Union, China, and North Korea pushed south into South Korea. The United States responded. 5,720,000 of our men and women served during the Korean War. Vietnam, once again, we're confronted with a spread of communism across the globe. Worldwide, 8.7 million men and women served in the military from 1964 to 1975. That's not including the 50,000 that served prior to in the country and before 1964. 648,000 troops in the country were drafted that served in the country of Vietnam. 2,061,918 volunteered. That is something I didn't know. In 1973, the draft ended. From that point forward, we went to an all-volunteer military. Everybody that serves to this day, with the weight of this nation on their shoulders, does so without receiving a draft notice in the mail and is doing it because they want to protect what we hold dear. Interesting fact, in 2016, the Senate proposed women registering for selective service. Do you understand what that means? That means, had it passed, that all you young women in here at the age of 18 would be signing up with selective service and potentially the draft if the man and woman power is ever needed to defend this nation. Desert Storm, Desert Shield, 1991, 650,000 service members deployed to the Middle East. Afghanistan, Iraq, 9/11, 2001. Do we understand what happened on that day? On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, our naval base in the Pacific. On 9/11, 2001, 2,977 civilians were killed and 6,000 were injured for doing nothing more than going to work, flying home from vacation, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles. Didn't do anything wrong. They just went to work one day. They didn't come home. 2.7 million have served up to date. So during wartime, and I'm going to take it back to World War I, since World War I, 40,333,557 men and women have served this nation, have put the weight of this nation on their shoulders. Since the American Revolution, that's 1775, 44,592,128 have served this nation, with 1.6 million giving their lives. Do you know what's interesting about that 1.6 million that gave their lives for this country? It's the fact that the other 42,992,128 were willing to do so. The minute that they signed their name on the dotted line, raised their right hand, they wrote a blank check payable to the United States of America, up to and including their life, and that's a fact. 242 years young we are as a nation. 45 million roughly serving since the American Revolution in time of war. How many more have served in time of peace in areas of the world that we will never know that we're in harm's way and are in harm's way today as we sit here recognizing Veterans Day? So I ask each and every one of you, do you think being a veteran matters? Where do you think we would be as a nation if these men and women right here had not stepped up and said, I will do anything and everything it takes to make sure that our way of life continues to move forward? So with that, that's the major part of my speech, and I was asked to do a little something here for the young people here in school and talk a little bit about myself and what the military has done for me. I can honestly say that I have been surrounded by the men and women just like this my entire life. I'm fortunate enough to have grown up with the greatest generation being right there. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, you name it. So when I was in elementary school, ever since I was a kid, I've always known I want to be in the military. It's a calling. It's just, as I said before, it's what we do in my family. And in third grade, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, having trouble learning to read, and was taken out, put in a special class. And by the time I was in fifth grade, I tested out on eighth grade level in reading. But I was never a stellar student in school. I was always an underachiever. I'd rather be hunting, fishing, doing something other than being in the classroom. But like I said, the one thing I wanted to do was join the United States military. So at least the one thing that I did get out of school is I mastered the basics. I learned to read, write, and do arithmetic. And I can tell you, if you can't do those three things, you cannot be successful in any capacity in life. So for you kids that are putting everything off, buckle down, learn to read, write, and do arithmetic. So I graduated high school at the age of 17. I was in basic training 2 weeks later. And on my 18th birthday, and I'll get a chuckle out of this group, that was my 18th birthday, we went to the gas chamber. So what do you think happened when they found out it was my birthday? We all got to sing happy birthday before we left the gas chamber. Yeah, when they throw tear gas on you, that's not a good thing. You just want to get in, get out, and be done with it. At the age of 26, I started out as a helicopter mechanic, moved into military intelligence. At the age of 26, found a way to go to sniper school, and that was the defining moment in my life. And I will tell you why. There were 3 Green Berets in my class. I was 26 years old, and on graduation day, 2 of those guys pulled me aside and said, you need to think about joining us. I had no idea. The underachiever from Russellville High School, to think that I could actually work side by side with the people or the men that I looked up to, that we all looked up to in the Army, that pushed me to go back to college. Imagine that, a kid with dyslexia learning to speak a second language. But I knew what I wanted to do. 9/11 hit. The next month I tried out for Special Forces, became a weapons sergeant. 2 years later I was sent back to the intelligence course, and that was my first time of having my fingers directly involved in a world-changing event. Not one that I directly was on the ground taking part in, but one when they walked in the room and said, took 10 of us and put us in a group and said, we want you to tell us how to do X, Y, and Z in this country. 2 weeks later, come back and brief it. A year later, watch it unfold on the news exactly the way we told them to do it. I was hooked. The next month, I went to Afghanistan, a heavy combat rotation in the spring of 2006. That is where and why I understand the families and what these men and women who have served in harm's way go through when they come home. Years later, became an Air Force officer. Wasn't for me. Resigned my commission. Went back to Special Forces. Now I just about a month ago graduated the Sergeant Major's Academy, and believe it or not, 2 years ago received a phone call that said your name came up, and it was because of my background as a state representative. Our teams were being deployed to Central Africa to hunt down a war criminal who was involved in modern-day slavery, child soldiers, rape, pillage, everything that you can imagine that is the worst thing on the face of the earth. But they needed a Green Beret who just happened to understand political dynamics and who could go into to the middle of the Civil War to deal with an ambassador in an embassy on behalf of the team who was operating in the jungle in South Sudan. So the amount of responsibility, I remember sitting back in my chair going, I cannot believe that they have turned me loose in this country. I have no supervision. I have all these classified mediums. I'm cleared to use the classified mediums in the Department of State. And it was me. Oh, and by the way, I was still running my office as a state representative. Nobody knew I was gone. Speaker of the House knew, coordinated it with him, my seatmate. But it's the 21st century. That's another thing we know how to do, is communicate. AT&T actually has a global plan in South Sudan in the middle of the Civil War. Had all my phones forwarded. People would call me from my district. I would answer them on a VoIP phone, email my assistant. I would, my seatmate knew I was gone, didn't know where. I would text him during the fiscal session and tell him how to vote my machine. So the whole time, he's getting a text from me, and he's reaching over and hitting my machine. I tell you all that because the United States military has given me things beyond anything I could have ever imagined. From a kid who had dyslexia when he was in elementary school to a guy who's working alone in the middle of a civil war on behalf of the United States of America, and by the way, was also a state representative. There are those of you in here who need the United States military. I'm not recruiting today. I'm just giving you the facts. The facts are, it gives you structure, discipline. It gives you the ability to take emotion, shut it off, and make decisions based on fact, to critical think. That's who these men and women are. They can turn emotion off, and they can look at facts, and they can make decisions based on those facts. It's a hard life. You family members know what it's like. But some of you are called to do it, or it's something that you probably need to really think about doing. So with that being said, I hope I didn't ramble too much. Again, thank each and every one of you for your service, for everything that you've given me and my family. My service has been nothing but a measurement of what you've given me. I'm just trying to measure up to these folks right here. I'll never make it. I'm just a trickle of a pebble dropped in a pond, just like each and every one of these people. They're all their own individual, but we all come together. When you drop all of us in the pond at the same time, we take the weight of this nation, put it on our shoulders, and we continue to move forward. Thank you again. God bless each and every one of you, and God bless the United States of America.
Why did you ring that up? So that we don't have to turn it? My name is Lauren Hackinson.
And I am Alyssa Hankins. Today we have the privilege to announce the names of the veterans in attendance. Will you please stand when you hear your name so that you can be properly recognized? Please hold the applause until the end.
Veterans of the U.S. Air Force. Airman First Class Bill Olliger. Sergeant Brian Butler. Sergeant Bruce Leggett. Airman First Class Charles Wayne Scott. Staff Sergeant Daniel Hayes. Staff Sergeant Floyd Strayer. Senior Master Sergeant Glenn Schnick. Airman First Class J. Tom Smith. Sergeant John Corella. Airman First Class Larry Black.
Lieutenant Colonel Martin F. Higley. Captain Paul Wilcox. Senior Airman Radis Yeager. Airman First Class Russell Bellamy. Staff Sergeant Tracy Winston. Sergeant Ronald Phillips. Veterans of the United States Army. Specialist Bill Baker.
Sergeant Bob Cook. Command Sergeant Major Charles C. Lyask. Specialist Charles F. Ray. Sergeant First Class Clark Halfacre. Corporal Del Inger. Sergeant First Class David Kane. Corporal Dean Patton. Sergeant Major Dennis Venanco.
Sergeant Irby Foster. Staff Sergeant Frank Duncan. Sergeant Garvin Greenland. Specialist Gary Fouché. Gary Flowers. Private First Class Harry Temple. Jack Langston.
Lieutenant Colonel Jim Gillum. Sergeant James Satterwhite. Lieutenant Colonel Jason Duvall. Specialist 5th Class Jimmy Carter. Sergeant Joe Gray. Sergeant Joseph Sinano.
E4 Larry Lynn. Sergeant Larry Noakes. Specialist 4th Class Leah Kane. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Sarton. Private First Class Nathan Duggan. First Sergeant Perry J. McGinty. Sergeant Richard Brawley.
Sergeant Ronnie Clendenon. Specialist Stephen Meeks. Specialist Thomas Taylor. Specialist E5 Wayne Coates. Staff Sergeant William Lott. Specialist E4 Marie Emmenhauser. Lieutenant Colonel Kylie Suhaltz. Corporal Philip Austin. Sergeant Ty Edwards. Sergeant E6 Brad Beck.
Sergeant Frank Smith. Petty Officer David Meeks. Specialist E5 Shelby G. Sorry. Corporal Philip Austin. Master Sergeant Lewis Crane.
Major Mike Hampton. Staff Sergeant Brian Gray. Corporal Elena Garrett, Sergeant Arval Martin,
Staff Sergeant Brenda Subert, Corporal Greg A. Morris, Sergeant Chase Tucker, Lance Corporal Darren Gaynor, Corporal James Wallace, Corporal Jason M. Young, Lance Corporal Loy Maines, Corporal Roger Jones,
Master Gunnery Sergeant Ron Subert, Corporal William Robinson, Staff Sergeant David Campbell, Staff Sergeant Ricky Taylor, Veterans of the United States National Guard, Sergeant Frank Smith, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Duvall, Sergeant First Class Mark Brady,
Veterans of the United States Navy, Petty Officer Second Class Bob Collier, CTA 4 Buddy Loveland, Petty Officer Second Class Chris Blacksmith, Petty Officer Second Class Frank Chapman,
Second Class Petty Officer Gene Ledke, Navy Storekeeper First Class Gene Gamble, Missile Fire Control FTM2 Herbert Evans Jr.,
Master Chief Navy Counselor James Blue, Petty Officer Third Class Jim Bowler, E4 Joe Hayes, Fireman Kenneth Ogle, Petty Officer First Class Leslie Treat, Senior Chief Yeoman Lydia Blue,
Petty Officer Second Class Ronnie Morgan, Petty Officer Third Class Roy Blacksmith, Petty Officer Third Class Ted Hutto, Lieutenant Commander William Palmer, E6 First Class Jim Ross.
We would also like to recognize the GHS students who are enlisting into the U.S. Army National Guard. Haley Frakes, Hunter Booth, Jacob Riella,
Jesse McClellan, Peyton Darter, Talon Poole, and Carson Poole.
Thank you to the people who have served and continue to serve the United States.
On behalf of the Greenbrier East program, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for attending today's Veterans Day ceremony. I would like to take this moment to give a few thanks to people behind the scenes. We are thankful to those who helped cater this event, such as Wagon Wheel, EHC Road Runners Club, and GHS teachers. We're thankful to those who participated in the ceremony, such as the speakers, the UCA Reserve Officers Training Corps, the band, the choir, both band under direction of Jennifer Church, then choir under the direction of Braden Fisher, and then, of course, our guest speaker, State Representative Trevor Drown. We'd like to thank the GHS students for the time and effort they put into setting up and running this event. And on that note, we'd like to extend an enormous gratitude. We would like to extend an enormous thank you to the students who organized this year's event. If these students would please stand or wave wherever you are: Addison Duncan, Caitlin Bellamy, Dalen Phillips, and Audrey Blacksmith. Greenbrier High School has been honored to host this ceremony for 15 years, and we hope to do so for many more years to come. The reason we do this is simple. Scripture says to us in Mark 12:31, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." That has always been and will always be our goal. However, this is sometimes forgotten. Students, let us never forget that commandment. As the youth of today, we can sit around and we can hope for a change, or we can be that change. We can serve those around us without the expectation of praise in return or anything in return, and create change with genuine kindness. Once again, I want to thank you all for being here today, especially our veterans and active duty members in attendance. Now, will everyone please rise for the retiring of colors by the UCA Reserve Officers Training Corps? Never mind. Well, okay, this concludes our ceremony. Students, we are going to dismiss by section to fourth period, I think. Fourth period? Okay, it's around that time. Fourth period. You guys can sit down. I'm so sorry. And if the veterans will remain seated until all the students clear out, and then we can serve you all lunch. What? Thank you very much. Great job. Great speech.
I know. I know his name. I was like, and I stuttered when I said his name too. I was looking for that.
I straight up butchered that last speech. Oh, no, it's not, Addison.
It's okay.
That was
Stop.
terrible. I butchered that last speech. Oh my God.
It was funny. I mean, it wasn't funny, but like, it wasn't like everyone's like, oh my god, that's.
It was fake, because it was awful. She was hurt. She was hurt.
potluck is at the top.
Yes, if handicapped, there are a few seats down here at the bottom.
Okay.
If they can.
All right, veterans and family, we are going to go ahead and begin our potluck, but first, I'm going to pray over our meal. So let's pray.